Great question. Great.
Welcome to the show, Abby Dahan. How are you doing?
Hello. Great. How are you guys? Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thank you for joining us on Food Farms and Chefs. So you actually have an interesting background because you were born in Paris, France.
That's right.
Before your family moved to South Jersey.
Mhm.
Now I know that your father was a chocolatier or sold chocolates.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, he worked for he worked for Cocoa Berry for a long time, which is a very big company. But he's been with Michelle Clazel for the almost 20 years now. Wow. Wow. I don't know why that threw me off. I wasn't expecting you that long, but yeah, almost 20 years.
Now, you said in one of your bios, you said that your mother was a really good chef as well, at least at home. So I don't know if you pulled from your love of being a pastry chef from both parents, or who inspired you to begin down this line of being a pastry chef.
I would say definitely both parents, because with my mom there was a lot of home cooking. Like every night, I was very fortunate. My mom really didn't work when we were young. Like she was a stay-at-home mom, so home cooked meals all the time. Obviously, the Jewish holidays, we had all these different foods and challah, et cetera, cakes that were, birthday cakes that were homemade, that were delicious. And then of course on the dad side, it was like, one of my earliest memories as a kid is my dad bringing home like the big, like they're technically like restaurant sized chocolate blocks, but as a child, you look at it and it looks like a chocolate bar that has been like someone put a ray on it and was like, make this 1,000 times bigger. And it's like always like, oh my God, this chocolate bar. So that's like one of my earliest memories was just being shocked at all that chocolate. So that definitely, I think, influenced me. But it wasn't until high school actually that I wanted to go into the culinary field. Before that, I wanted to be one of my lofty goal was to be, you guys are gonna laugh, a judge on the Supreme Court, because after reading Sandra Day O'Connor's bio, I was like inspired as a fourth grader. And so my goal was definitely to be, a lawyer and then a judge. And I just couldn't imagine not being that.
So then high school hit, and now I know, I grew up in South Jersey. I went to Shawnee.
No way.
Yeah. So they actually had one of their classes that they offered was cooking. Did you take a cooking school while you were in high school, or did that
They
not?
didn't have that. So I just kind of, honestly, I watched the Food Network. But at the time, the Food Network, not saying that I watch Food Network now, but at the time it was a very like chefy. So Jacques Torres, had a show. Gail Gann had a really good dessert show. Like the early Giada days, even like Rachel Ray I used to watch. And then I would just get in the kitchen and be like, oh, I saw this really cool grilled vegetable sandwich panini thing. Let me make it. And my mom would be like, yeah, please make things. I don't have to cook. Cool. So I just loved being in the kitchen, and I wanted to actually do savory cooking first. And then my dad was like, are you sure you want to do savory? Like, do you feel like you'd be comfortable eating pork and shellfish? And then I was like, no, actually, I don't want to do that, because that's something I had never done and I didn't really want to do. And to be honest, I still don't want to do. That's not something that entices me. So he was like, well, consider pastry. And I was like, okay, why not? And when you're young, you just like, you fucking go for it. You don't even think. You're like, that sounds great. Let's do that. So I did that. I just kind of went for it.
So when you did go for it, you actually ended up going back to Paris and studying in a very prestigious school, which I'm going to mess up the name again, even though we practiced. Um, so Gregory, I'm just going to go for it on English.
It's fine.
So Gregory Ferrandi. Now you can say it properly.
It's Grégoire Ferrandi. Yeah, it's one of the two, I would say, best pastry schools in Paris. There's a couple in France overall, but definitely that's like one of the number one schools in Paris.
So what was that like, making that decision to fly back there and, that's where you studied?
It was a little bit of a fight at first with my dad because, I had just finished high school, or I was in the process of finishing high school, and I wanted to be like my friends and I wanted to get the college experience. And I was like, no, I want to go to Johnson and Wales. And my dad was like, but you want to learn fresh pastry, just go to France. Like, you have family there, like you speak French. It's just kind of makes sense. Like, if you were American born and raised, like, sure, like I understand you wanting that comfort, but just try it. And so I was like, okay. So once again, just kind of didn't really think about it. And a week after graduating high school, just like left. And I started working actually at the Michel Clouzot store in Paris, like just over the summer, just to, re-immerse myself in French culture, because it's really wildly different, like living in Paris and living in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, as you might expect. Just a few different things. So kind of getting a couple months in there of like being like in France again. And then, yeah, I started school September, and it was, you just, you throw yourself in when you're young. You don't realize like what you're doing technically. You just kind of do it. And so I just did it. And I was probably really nervous, but I don't remember that. Like, I don't remember those feelings. I just remember doing it.
Yeah. Now, after you, or actually maybe even during, because you apprenticed at Gerard Mulot,
Mm-hmm.
which is another like high demand, like prestigious, bakery in France. And I know everybody, when you're there in Paris, you find a bakery that you're like, that's my bakery. So you were at one of the most well-known ones. And, what was that like, doing your apprenticeship there?
I would say that was probably scarier than the schooling, because, you start school and you're still in school. Like, you have teachers who help you and guide you. You have students with you that you can commiserate with, be like, oh, that class, or oh, look at that cake that I messed up. It looked terrible. But when you're in a work setting, you're actually in a work setting. So there is no, you can mess up and it's okay, or like you just get kind of like a crappy grade. It's no, this needs to go to a customer. So you can't mess up.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I remember, it was early on in my apprenticeship, we had a sous chef who I still talk to this day. And like, I ended up like loving the guy, but he was terrifying. Also a little inappropriate, because that's what they do over there. It's the times, they have changed. But at the time, he was like a little bit scary, and he just like lined up all the apprentices. There was maybe 6 or 7 of us. And he was like, somebody, or maybe even 2 people, are not going to make it. So show me what you got and get ready to kill it, because if you don't, you're out. And we were all like, oh God. So it's a little scary, because you have that. And then you have a French chef who, while very kind, if he got mad at you, like, I have one incident where I'm not a crier at work. Like, I'm like, be strong. But he made me cry because he ripped me a new one, like a whole new one. So that experience to me was so much character building, because you have to have a not only extremely tough shell to be able to take criticism and long work days, but also just to kind of forge yourself. And, coming from a fairly I would say coddled background. I mean, growing up in Cherry Hill is like very gentle and very kind. My family, a very safe bubble. So all of a sudden you're like thrown into something where like, I don't know anyone. We're all working really hard. I'm 18 years old. I've never worked in a kitchen. I've never stood on my feet for more than like an hour or two a day, or a little bit more. I did theater, so I guess if theater practice, but all of a sudden you're standing for 10 to 12 to 14 hours a day, and you're like, my body's failing me, like I'm so young, So that too was like not only are you forging your resiliency in your like mentally, but also physically. And so in the end, I not only learned a ton, but I feel like it truly made me like the pastry chef that I ended up becoming later on.
Now, moving forward, you moved back to the US, and did those experiences in that learning environment prepare you for working at the Chicago Hyatt and, in Las Vegas and, the various places that you had worked prior to moving back to Philadelphia?
Yeah, so definitely, I think one of the missteps of a lot of cooks is they don't take the chance to learn in a bunch of different places. So, um, what I ended up doing is, obviously I went from a patisserie, and then I did do a very small jump back in the Philly area. I worked at the Ritz-Carlton, but for a very short time. And then I was transferred to the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando, which was a dual property with the Marriott. And that was an incredible experience because I went from working in like, a pretty high volume pastry shop, which is a lot, and going to like a hotel. But, at the time it was winter, so it was very slow. But then going to basically a double hotel that was very convention heavy, banquets for 2,000. So you get a different type of resiliency from that. You know what I mean? So you learn not only how to do high volume in the sense of like a bakery, because there were different aspects that were kind of bakery-esque, but you also are like, okay, and now I need to make 2,000 creme brulee, and they all need to be really nice. So that's something else that you have to learn to do. That's really hard, like being consistent for that many things. It's not only difficult like to do physically, but also mentally,
Yeah.
because it's draining to do the same thing over and over for 8 hours a day. You're like, oh my God, I rolled truffles for 8 hours. Oh my God, that's like, I need a break. I need like a mental break from this. Let's do something else. So that was a great experience for me. I did 2.5 years there. So I really got a lot of experience.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until Chicago at the Park Hyatt where I got true restaurant experience, because at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando, the department was very banquet heavy. So one person would get sent to like the line to work the restaurants or the different stations. But for the most part, I did just heavy production. Like and that's still to this day, that's my thing.
Yeah.
Even when I was at Park, I'm like, I love just like busting production out. It's like my favorite thing. It feels so good, like so satisfying. So at the Park Hyatt, it was like really big change because I went from giant hotel to really small hotel, super fine dining, kind of like French, these beautiful plates. We're quenelling all the ice cream. And I'm not even ashamed to say, up until then, I had never really quenelled ice cream. Like when you're in a banquet setting, you're not quenelling 2,000 scoops. You're just
Yeah.
not. Everything is pre-scooped, and you have to because
It's a large
time is of the
volume.
essence.
Yeah.
You just can't. You just physically can't. So I went there as supervisor, and I think it was the first time I ever went to a job being like, wow, I don't think I'm prepared for this. Like, I don't know if I'm ready to be a supervisor. But it's one of those things where you have to fake it until you make it, And I had such a great chef, a great mentor. I love the guy. I mean, like, even to this day, he's just like somebody I think very fondly on because he taught me so much. He trained me for my first competition. Like, he really, and it was just a very talented man. So, I had a great experience there.
And I feel like you're very internally driven because you had mentioned your first competition, which I feel like you're kind of like glazing over the level of that competition.
Yeah. Once again, me doing things that I didn't realize at the time were like, I'm like, yeah, this seems like a good idea. This could be fun. Like my chef was like, hey, you should consider signing up for this. And I was like, sure, I'll like, let's put some recipes together. So I came up with these recipes and we kind of worked out like how I was going to do them. And that was the process, is you had to like essentially create these 3 desserts that they were looking for and then send them in the recipes and the design. And then they would pick people to actually like
Perform it.
perform in the competition.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I probably won't get picked, but like, okay, here we go. And then I did. And then my chef was like, okay, well, we have to like, you're going to have to practice.
Mm.
So luckily it was like around a very slower period, wintertime in Chicago is not that it's that slow, but it's not exactly like bustling. So he just like put me in this like kitchen that we had. And he was like, okay, you're going to make these from top to bottom. This is your timing. This, he would come around and be like, there's a spot of raspberry on your counter. And I'm like, okay, no one's going to see it. It's fine. He'd be like, no. Wipe everything down. Stay as clean as you can. People will be walking around. People will be judging how you're working. Like, was really hard on me, but it ended up working out because I ended up winning, which was cool and super unexpected.
And that was the Cacao Berry L'Art du Chocolatier challenge, correct?
Yes, and it was their first one. So they've changed a bit now. Now everyone has to do like a showpiece and all that stuff. But for the first one, you had to make a plated dessert, a tart, and a verrine, like a dessert in a glass. And all these like judges were like amazing judges. And you're like,
one of them was an MOF winner too.
Yeah, Laurent Branlard. There were a few. Even like one of the guys I was up against, Patrick Fahey, he was at the French Laundry, and then he was at Blackbird. I had 2 chefs from Robuchon that I was up against. I had my old sous chef from Orlando, who's like beyond talented. I don't even know how I won against him because he's truly like one of the most talented creative people I've ever met. His name is Yoshikazu Kizu. He's back in Japan now. And so that I think that was the most intimidating thing personally. But once you're there, at least for me, I'm like tunnel vision. I'm like, these are my objectives. This is what I have to do. I'm just going to get it done. I'm going to get it done as best as I can. And then we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
And you won. And sticking to the competition, theme right now, I don't know what your second competition is, but I do know what your third one was, which was the Food Network, the chopped sweets.
Yes. So actually the second one was also Food Network. I did back in the day when it was Sweet Genius with Ron Ben Israel. But yes, Chopped was not last year, the year before. Yes, we filmed right before the pandemic hit. That was a really cool time. Really fun.
So what was that like being presented with ingredients where you were just like, what do I do with this?
Well, I think it's definitely stressful, but at the end of the day, I kind of went in, I don't know if everyone does this, but the way I thought about it is, what can I make that is general enough that I can incorporate different ingredients? So before I watched as many of the episodes as there were. I think there were only a few because it was fairly new. And I just kind of watched what they did. And I also paid attention to what kind of dishes they were using. So, which is like super weird and anal, but I noticed one dish and I was like, oh, that dish is beautiful. I'm definitely going to use that on the show. Like, I just know I'm going to use it. So I already had kind of a game plan of what I wanted to do as far as desserts go without even knowing what my ingredients were. Because I figure I can probably incorporate on the fly somehow something with these ingredients. But I also got fortunate, I think, because none of the ingredients were like really weird. They were annoying to like work out, but not weird in the sense that they tasted bad.
Okay.
Like I got a pavlova with berries and cream. Thank you. Almond paste. Okay.
Easy.
Like nerds, delicious. Like we can make something. So
you like crush them up.
Yeah, you crush them up. You make a sauce. Like if you watch Chopped enough, which I love that show. I watch it all the time, no matter what, just like savory, sweet. you kind of understand like what works in that kitchen and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Like quick things, a sauce will work. Like sometimes an ice cream, it will work in your favor, sometimes not. And if you want to show, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe breaking it too early.
Yeah, or having the ice cream machine available and then having to think of something else like, ooh. So yeah, some things work, some things don't. But at the end of the day, I think they do want you to like relatively succeed. So they try not to give you things that are like really insane. Like there's always one like slightly weird ingredient, but for the most part, they have kind of an idea. I feel like they have kind of an idea of what they want you to do with it.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't know. It's hard, but they give you a few minutes before I don't know if I should be giving away these secrets, but
No.
they give you a few minutes before the episode actually starts. But I mean, listen, whatever. What are they gonna? I think I'm past my contract period. It's all good.
Your NDA.
Yeah, exactly. But no, like you don't listen. They don't tell you in advance, so it's not like that's definitely a surprise. But once you open the basket, then they're like, okay, you have like 1 minute. What's in your mind? Write it down, and they have. And I think it's actually really smart. They have you write it down. So I think you can solidify it in your head.
Yeah.
But then they take away your paper. Like you're not keeping this paper. You're literally just writing it down for the.
They tease you with a cheat sheet and then they take it from you.
Yeah, but I actually think that's helpful because at least for me, writing something down, I'm like, okay, now I kind of remember what I'm doing. Because in the heat of the moment, when there's hot as balls in there, and you have people looking at you, people asking you questions, you're like, please, Scott, get out of my face. Like like you don't have time to think. You just have to do.
Yeah.
So I think writing it down helps you just like focus on the doing, so you don't have to think about it. And the people that think too hard don't succeed generally.
Now, did your background with Park and the love, did that help with preparing you for that high demand situation?
Wait, you said the love?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. But I know that you did work at the Dandelion.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Working in a restaurant like Park, just any high volume restaurant, you have to think on your feet constantly. There's always like, this VIP person is entirely vegan. Can you make them something? Oh, and they're here in 5 minutes. Can you make them something? And you're like, yeah, I mean, for sure. But you have to constantly just like, just be on your feet. And that definitely helps. And also being that I am highly like production oriented, I know how to bust shit out. Like that's, like I said, that's my bread and butter. I'm sorry, am I not supposed to say like bad words?
Expletives, yeah, it's all right.
Sorry. It's beyond me sometimes. I will tone that down. My apologies.
No,
I love it. You come from the kitchen. That's you come from the kitchen.
Sometimes I'm like,
I just have to mark down where they have to bleep it on the radio.
My bad. I will refrain. I will try. So yeah, I like to really just like bust things out. So for me, when I'm like, okay, I know I'm making a Madeleine batter and this and this and this, like just go do it. Don't even think about it. And yeah, so definitely being in a high volume type situation, yes, definitely prepares you 100%.
Now, you were furloughed because of the pandemic, and you started cooking out of your own kitchen and selling your baked goods through that. And I remember like reading about that and hearing about that like through the news. And I'm like, oh, I actually get to speak with you. Now, did winning Chopped Sweets, did that like, was that kind of like your next level start into doing the baked goods out of your home? Or did you use that to start the bake school?
So actually neither, because we filmed. All right, I have to think back because I feel like this pandemic has been going on for about 1,000 years. So we filmed Chopped in February of 2020. The pandemic hit. I started the bake school over the summer, like June-ish, but the episode didn't come out until September. But what happened was I was at home, and my original kind of thing was, especially for selling some baked goods, was I I know there's like in the area where I live, which is Rittenhouse Square, there's a lot of elderly people. And I knew they were kind of stuck like in their homes, whatever. And so I wanted to make challahs so that if someone needed a challah for like Shabbat, even if they don't do Shabbat, but like they're Jewish and they're like, I want a challah, I can't even go to Schlesinger's or whatever. So that I offered, I was like, does anyone know anyone who wants a challah, who needs a challah? So it kind of started out like that. And then I had friends reach out to me and be like, hey, it's my daughter's birthday. Can you make a cake? And then it kind of started from there very slowly. And it was nice because I also just, you spend every day working 10 to 12 hours or more actively. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I have nothing to do. And it's great for like a week. The first week, my husband's like, you're glowing. You look rested and happy. And then I was like, okay, I am seriously bored. So it was nice to keep busy and to feel like I had a purpose, because you just lose your sense of purpose. And then I had a friend, acquaintance reach out to me and be like, hey, the company I work for, we're looking to do a group activity. We're just tired of all these like Zoom happy hours. They're just really boring. Would you be interested in like doing a pastry class for us? And I was like, hell yeah, like that sounds great. I used to do classes at Cook all the time, and they're super fun for me. I really enjoy like the teaching aspect. So that was kind of like the first thing I did. And then I had a girl that I know through, as we all know, through people through Instagram these days. And she worked for a company who, it's a company in Philly, but I guess they've sold their another company, but they ended up hiring me like 2 or 3 times a month for classes. And so I just started doing classes and kind of getting my bearings, as far as not only teaching in the sense that people are baking with you, which is very different from a demo of like the cook situation, but also just becoming a better teacher. Because you don't like, if you're a manager in a restaurant you teach all the time. I'm teaching all the time. Yeah. But there's a difference between teaching someone who is in the workplace and then teaching someone who just wants to do this for fun, is trying to find like something different in their day. And like, it's not that serious. It is, but like it isn't. So finding that fine line of teaching them enough where they're like, ooh, this is really interesting, but not so much crazy in depth where they're like, this is scary and I'm afraid to mess this up. Like, it's okay if you mess up. Like, you're just learning, we're doing this over Zoom. It's no big deal. So it kind of started out like that. But now I have some pretty serious clients who are like, I want to learn how to make some cool things. I'm like, let's do it. Let's do it.
I know. And I went on your bake school website and I saw that you have 2 different levels. You have like true beginners, and then you have a slightly more advanced class as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that real quick? And then I will have to let you go. Unfortunately, I love speaking with you. I know, but
I'm such a talker. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. So the Bake School has, for the public classes, I like to host, for those who can't afford necessarily one-on-one teaching, I will host kind of like a normal class. We go over some fairly basic, easier pastry things. And then I like to do advanced classes, maybe things that are a bit longer or 2-parters, or that involve techniques that maybe they have to have seen and done first already, like making a mousse, making a yeasted dough, things like that. So I can cater to all levels, which is the idea. Like, not everyone's going to come to me and be like, I'm an amazing baker. That's okay. Like, I don't want you to be, because that's what I'm here for. And that's the point of the Bake School, is not only do you get to learn, either in a public setting or a private setting, but you can essentially pick what you want to learn. If you're, especially in a private setting, you have something you set your eyes on, making croissants. Okay, well, you know what? We got to book 3 days, but let's do it. Let's figure it out. I'm going to show you from point A to Z, and then you're going to have croissants. And that's my goal. And as long as the person can walk away from the experience and be like, I could do this myself next time, then I feel really good, because I know I've done my job.
Yeah. All right, Abby, thank you for joining us. Let everybody know who is tuning in, listening, and watching the video. How do they find you on socials, and where do they find your website?
So they can find me at Abby Dahan or at the Bake School. And they can definitely just message me through there via DM or email. That's right on my page as well. And hopefully I look forward to teaching some of you guys out there.
All right, Abby, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Abby.
Thank you for having me. Sorry we didn't get to your question, Jean.
I know, I
That's
feel
okay.
bad.
Abby, can you stay on for 1 second? I have a question for you after.
Sure, no problem.
All right, thank you.
To become
Thanks.
a sponsor of our show
I'm here.
and have your business or event promoted on
Yes.
every single podcast platform, 2 Philadelphia radio stations on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. evening drive time, an FM station in New York, and to the millions of Facebook users worldwide with access to the Facebook mobile app. Send us an email to either foodfarmsandchefs@yahoo.com or diningonadime@yahoo.com.
Everybody still there?
Yes.
So, Abby, I have a very close friend of mine that does shared spaces in the city, kind of thing,
Okay.
like multi-use spaces. But she just bought a kitchen that she's renovating. She herself is not a chef or anything like that. She's a young entrepreneurial businesswoman. But one of the things that she did is she turned this into a kind of studio kitchen type of facility. It used to be a pizza place. She retained some of the equipment. I consulted with her on new equipment and all. And for an extremely, extremely low rental, she's looking to rent it out to anybody who wants to teach classes.
Yes.
In any type. So if it's okay, I'll
great.
have we're Amaris. Do you have Abby's information?
Yes, I do.
If you can send that to me, I'll put the two of you together. I just wanted to introduce you. I think it would be a very cool thing. It's in Old City, so it's right there in the city for you. It's a great space.